I mean, it was pretty clear after episode 1 that this was going to be a show that was meant to try to make you cry, and with each story it probably would do so pretty damn easily. But this week's episode, which is at least a two-parter, is a very interesting one. After coming off of a dying boy who just wanted to be with friends and family, we enter a sacrifice, culture that decides randomly which village they go to. They pick the most innocent child and seemingly feed it to a bear or something to that nature. It's a barbaric, horrible tradition, and no one wants to obey, but seemingly they kind of have spears to their throat saying either we'll kill you all or we'll kill one of you. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. And to watch a girl who, she just wants to grow up to be a mom. That's all she wants. And seemingly she kind of got to experience it even briefly within this episode, and based on the preview a bit more in next week's episode with our orb who doesn't know what it is to be alive. This character has died multiple times, but because it's immortal, it just comes back. And honestly, this episode gave me very familiar feelings to that of recently an anime, but it was originally a very classic manga known as, I always forget how to say the name, it's like Dororo. It's such a hard tongue twister of a name, but that follows a story about an immortal being that over time picks up more and more of his humanity, body parts that lets him become more human as he travels with a child who pretty much is kind of like the mentor of what it means to be a person. As the more he becomes human, the more monster he sort of becomes all at the same time. And the dynamic that we saw between these two gave me a very reminiscent feeling, and that's a good thing to me because I love the dynamic of having seemingly a monster to most people's point of view and just peak innocence, right? Something that is trying to teach them what it is to be a person. And to simply watch a character who we've seen die multiple times within the first minute of the episode. We saw his eye go back into his socket, he reforms in this horrifying way, and to just watch her teach him how to eat as he pretty much is an animal. He doesn't eat from the hands, he eats like a wolf. And it's so interesting to watch a story where rather than just kicking off with this immortal being who can speak fluently, who can do this and that, the reason why I really like stories like the previously mentioned Dororo is because you have a story where clearly you don't know is this going to be a blessing or a curse because the character doesn't know how to act essentially normal. Because in this situation, I mean, him waking up and being revived saved this girl's life even momentarily. The issue is that because he doesn't really know what it means to protect, we see in the preview of next week's episode, the girl gets walked away. And it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen because within the first couple of minutes of this episode, the message is pain promotes growth, and that with the more pain that this orb experiences, the more the orb learns. So it feels like the death of this girl is probably going to be something that helps promote what it means to probably lose something, and it will think back to the boy and probably everything it's experienced up until that point. This episode did a great job at making you immediately care for this character. And that's one of my biggest issues with episodic style storytelling. I'm not the biggest fan. In fact, there's a lot of anime that are considered masterpiece in the anime community that I recognize are well written by the looks of it. It's just I'm not a big sucker into weekly storytelling. Even if it's a couple of episodes per story, personally prefer like getting introduced to a character and then growing with them over multiple episodes before something good or bad happens. Because for me, to be introduced generally to a character like March, I would say, oh, you know, it's sad that she's going to be sacrificed, but why do I care, personally, right? I mean, this is a world that clearly a lot of bad things are going to happen. I mean, I don't have that same emotional connection. But we're currently 2 for 2 with To Your Eternity, and immediately make me say, this is a girl who has a dream. And I think that's the big difference between a lot of episodic storytelling and something like To Your Eternity, where you immediately are giving goals for these characters who bad things are going to happen. In the first episode, it was the simple desire to want to be with friends and family, and that's why that journey was so painful. In here, we have a girl who's just an innocent child who wants to grow up to be a mommy. That's all she wants, and seemingly that's being ripped away from her. It's a simple idea, and I feel like that's honestly my biggest issue with most episodic style storytelling, is while I look at this orb and I say it's so fascinating to watch bad and good things happen to because it's such an interesting concept, it'll be great to watch the journey explore, but at the same time, all these random characters who will have good or bad things happen, you really have to hook me in with an initial personality or gimmick and then give me something that really makes me care for them in a short amount of time. And I think the idea of giving this at least 2 episodes is a good one because with last week, one episode is the perfect length for a story like that. Here, I was like, okay, I really hope this isn't going to be all resolved within one episode, because based on what we're seeing, the orb is very much growing attached like a parental figure to this girl. And I like how we're clearly going to continue with that next week before probably the inevitable happens and tears are going to be falling down her face. This show is really good with writing, and while maybe it's premature to say because we're only 2 episodes into a 20-episode anime, the production value from the amazing animation, like I was honestly surprised with some of the girls' animation. It actually reminded me similar to something of like a Studio Ghibli film where like she was tumbling down and things like that. It just feels so crisp and polished, and it kind of makes sense given I think this anime was delayed, I think twice, if I'm not mistaken. It was delayed at least once, but I think it was delayed up to 2 times. I think originally this was supposed to come out at like the beginning of last year or something like that, which clearly the delay is obviously due to COVID in the real world, but also clearly just polishing this beast up to maximum potential. It's shining beautifully, and the opening song I think does such a great job at not only visualizing the types of stories we'll experience. There's some action, there's some heartbreak, there's some hope, but it feels like the song is meant to invoke almost at the same time every type of emotion as it's kind of fighting in this ball, and then you leave the opening and you start the episode and you're like, I have no idea what this story is going to tell me now, but I'm a little terrified and I'm a little excited. I just think the idea of a character as basically being nothing, starting out knowing nothing, and watching all the influences that will clearly determine how this character will live its life going forward is a great way. And I love the narrator at the beginning of last week and this week's episode. I hope it continues. Honestly, one of my top voice actors in the anime industry, and to have this narrator just simply explain, I guess you could say the obvious, but I think it gives it such, there's like a chill to the voice that makes it feel so almost godlike. And I have no idea what this voice is. Is it actually God? Is it just a mindless bystander? Is it a character that this orb will influence in the future? Hard to say, right? Or maybe that's actually going to be the orb's voice. Either way, I love the idea of how they're presenting the storytelling, and honestly, while yeah, we're only 2 episodes in, I've seen plenty of stories with emotional and engaging hooks fall off after a few episodes or a few stories that it tells. I don't think so. It's not like this is an unknown author, and I've heard like where some people have said the story does fall off, we shouldn't be getting it in this season anyway. So to me, it feels like one of those things that should be, while maybe not every episode will be peak emotional, happy or sad, it feels like every story that this character goes through is going to influence it in some way, and I think that's what makes it so exciting. Even if the character that we get introduced to for that story isn't our personal favorite, we understand the influence it will have, good or bad, on this orb, and that makes any episode not feel pointless. Like, that kind of feels like the direction we're going, and it's great for that. I mean, it feels like anime is definitely getting anime characters right a lot more these days. I remember, like, if we rewind, like, 3 to 5 years ago, anime kids, and they're so annoying, they're so pointless, but it feels like almost every anime child I see in any of the series I watch anymore, they're written to not be this trope of annoyance, but rather you look at a character like March and you're like, she deserves to be able to grow up. And I love the emotional sting of her parents having to put on a brave face, but behind closed doors just crying, and that the father couldn't even go near his daughter because a male can't taint her. It's like, that's her father. If you're gonna be barbarians, at the very least give the man some comfort before he ultimately has to send his daughter to the grave. Like, and the fact that they even cover their tracks with like, oh, what happens if she runs away? Oh, we'll take someone else in your place. What happens if she runs away? We'll take the one that can't run. This is barbaric. It is horrible, and I hate practices that prey on children like this, where like you need a sacrifice for some unknown god. It's like, god damn, get the hell out of here with this practice. This show's amazing. It's still hitting me. I think last week is still my favorite episode, but I don't think this episode is bad in the slightest. I still think it's a masterpiece through and through. Let me know your thoughts and feelings and your ideas of where it could go next week if you don't know anything about the source material. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you're happy new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.